I'm not entirely sure how to start this video, mostly because whenever I tell stories, they often happen a while ago and are not recent. This one happened yesterday, and I wanted to wait until I felt a little bit more composed before I got to talk about this. As many of you may know, I am pregnant. I'm having a child somewhere this year, and I need to do monthly checkups to see the state of the baby. Now, I do have a set of a place that I go to get these checkups done. You often have to go to the same place since they do keep record of how you're advancing as like a mother physically, how you're feeling, how the baby's doing. It's monthly checkups and you have to go to the same place again and again. Now, I feel like I can't start this story without explaining the background context of where this condition of mine comes from. I call it a disability. I don't have a proper name for what I'm going through, but I will explain how it started, how it has affected me, and what happened yesterday. For context, me and my husband went to do one of my monthly checkups. This is with an hour assigned. I've been waiting for over a month for this because I originally had a time set for me for January 2nd, but they moved it into January the 9th for unknown reasons. They didn't explain to me. They just told me, hey, I don't care if you have time, just accept it. They just gave me a phone call around that time, told me, no, your time has been moved to another time. Now it's the 9th, and they just gave me a phone call, and yeah. Luckily, I do have a more accommodating schedule, so I could go, but I can think of many women who simply don't have that kind of luxury. They cannot go at any time of the day, and that can really screw them over. As unfair as that is, sadly, because of the healthcare system I'm in right now, this is not something that I can really battle against, so you just kind of have to accept it. It sucks, but it's all I have, so, I can't really fight against it. We went to the doctor in time. We were supposed to be there by 3 p.m. We went there at the assigned time. I made my checkup. If you get late to that place, I believe that they give you 10 minutes to arrive late. If you don't, then you've already lost the hour and you'll have to wait another month to get the hour back. This is a problem because a baby develops a lot during a month, and they will simply not consider you if you arrive late, any late than 10 minutes. It doesn't matter if that day there was a massive amount of cars, it doesn't matter if something personal happened, you just lost the hour, and because of how crowded the system is, you would have to wait an entire month without knowing if your baby is okay or not. This applies to anything. This could apply even for operations or similar stuff. It really sucks, but we had to be there on time. Of course, I was there on time. The weather was extremely hot that day, and I have some troubles with weather things. I'm going to explain this a little bit when it comes to talking about my disability, but we decided to wait. The weather was over 30 Celsius. In Fahrenheit, I believe it was over 90 Fahrenheit, and because the weather is so dry, it felt over 100 Fahrenheit. That's like the physical sensation you have. That is way too much for me, and I had to be there. I couldn't lose my hours, so I just had to sit there. I waited for over an hour to get attended, and I still was not getting attended. According to them, they had an emergency with another pregnant mother who was diabetic, and that's why they couldn't attend me. However, when I asked for why it's taking so long, they did give me a different explanation. They said that often they give the same woman they give 2 to 3 women the exact same hour, 3 p.m., and they have this priorities list, and I was at the last of it. I do have to explain this at this point because I think that it's probably a lot of Americans are looking at me weird. I'm not American, I'm Latina, I'm Chilean specifically. This is the public healthcare system. Sadly, we cannot afford private one, and this is what we get. I was over an hour waiting there, and it was a different excuse. They said that they had an emergency, but then they said that it was just that they called too many women at the same time, because that's how the system works. It's just crowded, and whoever arrives first gets, the cake. The problem is that I started to get a crisis because of the weather. The weather is something that affects me deeply. It's a physical reaction, and it's one of the triggers to have this crisis. Now, I don't think I can go anymore without explaining where this disability comes from. It's a disability, it's a condition, I don't know what to call it. I sadly have never been able to get a proper doctor to look at this. I just know that it's something that I live with and that I'm forced to survive with. In a different video of this channel, I talked about anxiety tics. They feel like my body is contracting against its own will. And I did mention that there was a very specific event that caused this anxiety tics to begin. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to warn you, it's going to be a heavy topic. It's going to include a lot of complicated things, so if you don't feel comfortable hearing about those kind of stuff, I would recommend that this is the time to click away, because it is going to be very bad. This happened when I was 15. At the time, I was dealing with a lot of trauma that I was not allowed to deal with properly. If you've seen my channel, you've known that I've been through a lot of stuff. I've been near death experiences, I've been stalked, I've been harassed. I've been through a lot. I've been sexually abused too, physically raped. I was not allowed to breathe between any of these things because I felt like I couldn't talk about it with anyone. On top of dealing with all of this trauma, I was also dealing with undiagnosed autism. So, for example, a school would be hell for me because of all the chattering, all the noise, and overall it was just very, very difficult for me. On top of that, I had a lot of other stuff that was happening. My family, if you've seen some of my videos before, you know that it wasn't the best. They were constantly arguing. At school, I felt completely isolated. On top of dealing with trauma, on top of dealing with school stress of trying to be the best student, on top of that, I was also being groomed and sexually exploited by an adult. I don't feel comfortable talking about that yet, but that's like its own entire story. And on top of that, the information regarding mental health was little to none. For example, I had no idea the meaning of intrusive thoughts. I didn't know what those were. So whenever I thought something really bad or negative, I thought that it was something that reflected on me and something that I should get punished for. In all of this mess, my mind started to break. I think it's very normal when you're forced to keep all of those things inside of you. And at some point, I did attempt to take my own life away. I was supposedly going to a therapist, but that therapist told me that she didn't know how to deal with me and that she simply didn't have any hope in me getting better. As such, she just gave up on me and I was just going there for no reason. After the incident where I attempted to take my own life away, there were other stuff that were happening too. My mind really did start to break. I started to hear like voices and I started to see things that were not there. While this had been happening before, it is very likely that the reason why this hallucinations started to happen was because of all the trauma and stress accumulated. Obviously, no one knew how to deal with me. Literally, no one. As such, this therapist told us to simply go to a psychiatrist, where I was placed against my will inside there. I was a minor, so I didn't get to choose if I wanted or not to go to the mental hospital. Now, for a lot of Americans, mental hospitals, either they think of the scary asylum place or they think of a place that it's supposed to help people with mental struggles get better. My story aligns more with the mental asylum kind of thing. I was placed there, and at first it was okay and charming, but very fast I realized that the place was not very good. I realized that some of the other minors, all the patients were minors. Some of the minors had more privileges than others. They could just get to every part of the hospital every time they wanted. I didn't know why at the time. I just knew that there was a hierarchy and that I tried to adapt, but due to all the stuff that was already going on before I got there, obviously I didn't fit in exactly well. And the queen bee, to call it somehow, I know that it's not the queen bee, the terminology, but the girl with the most privileges there immediately started to target me. She would insult me, physically hit me, and scream at me constantly. The nurses would simply allow this and they would tell nothing to her, but if someone tried to defend me, then they would act and they would threaten them to just keep quiet. Of course, I didn't know this at the time, but that girl, this girl with privileges, didn't have privileges just for any reason. One of the nurses there, a male nurse, was sexually assaulting her. She seemed to have a crush on this guy, and that's why she was like so happy whenever she came to her room. I started to realize this because there was always this like male nurse that came into the dorms whenever the others were in the main salon, and I realized that she was there, and you know, it's not too hard to just add one thing and another. And in order to keep everything quiet, they just gave this girl a bunch of privileges. Obviously, this is horrible. That girl was a victim, but at the same time, she was also constantly targeting me and harassing me for just existing, I guess. I wasn't the only one, and I started to get along with the other people she harassed, especially this one girl who used to cover her eyes a lot. She was honestly a nice person. She was a lot into anime, so I guess that's why she covered her eyes. This whole thing of like covering the eyes was very popular back in the day. She was sweet. She was nice. She had a horrible backstory of why she ended up there. She was constantly being abused and sexually assaulted by family members and neighbors. So she would tell me that she would rather be there than go back home, despite how they treated her. We made friends and we had this like dorms together. Often the patients would sleep 4 girls at the same room. It was a relatively small place. My disability started one night. She was supposed to take a shower and I was waiting for her outside. But then I realized that the water never started to sound and that she was taking too long inside of the bathroom. So I decided to go in and ask if everything was fine. After receiving no answer, I decided to enter to check if she was fine. And that's when I found her. She was hanged. She hung herself with her own clothing in the bathroom. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. So I tried to get her off. She was still alive and she was pushing me away. She wanted to die. So I just called the other nurses. They got her down and then she started to scream. I thought it was just her having a panic attack, but then I realized that they were forcing her into one of these I don't know how to call them, the crazy jackets, the ones that are like white and they appear in movies. They are not supposed to be used nowadays. It's very old equipment that is already been proven to do more harm than good to the patient. On top of that, they were adding belts to a bed, and it generally just felt like I was watching a horror film as they took her away to another point of the hospital. I could still hear her screams as she begged for them to leave her alone. Again, I thought she was just having a panic attack, so I just decided to wait. They gave me a different room and I went inside of it. I was shaking and I didn't really know what to do. Some nurses came to the room and they told me that they were going to give me medicine to relax, a type of drug. I told them that I didn't want to, that I just wanted to be left alone, but they didn't listen to me. They didn't care. They very forcefully put me down and put down my pants. The male nurse that was sexually abusing the other girl was also there, and he couldn't help but make a comment about how cute my ass was. So, sexual harassment in the middle of a crisis situation. I was then given a needle with a strange kind of blue liquid that came from a thing with no label. They just took a bunch of it and injected it into my butt, and it hurted. It hurted a lot. It felt like I was feeling nerves in my body that I had never seen before. I didn't know I had so many blood vessels in my body until I started to feel them getting completely freezed down by whatever these things were giving me. It hurted so much. I just begged them to stop, and I just started to scream to leave me alone. They wouldn't, and the pain was so much that at some point I couldn't even understand my own words. My scream sounded just as horrible as the other girl's scream, and that's when I understood why she was so panicked about the nurses. The nurses were torturing the both of us, while claiming that they were helping us. I felt terrified, I felt abused, and the pain was just unbearable. Sometimes I can still feel it. At some point I started to lose consciousness. It was either the drug or the pain. I remember telling the nurse to just please don't leave me there because I didn't want to be alone. But I couldn't talk. My mouth was half asleep. And the nurse, she just left me there. I felt like I was being left to die, and my body was losing control without my mind being able to do anything about it. Now, I've been trying to see what this drug was. I've been trying to do some online research on what it could be, but I personally could never find what it could have been on my own for many years. And at the same time, I was too traumatized to even try to look it up too much. That was until August of the previous year, in 2025. Near my birthday, I was talking about this with one of my friends, and he knew a thing or two about old-fashioned drugs that they use in mental asylums. One of these drugs was called blue heroin. Now, I don't blame you if you don't know about this very specific type of heroin. You probably know heroin as like a very bad drug, but blue heroin is a mix between heroin and another drug, I cannot remember the name, that was giving it this like blue tint. Often given as powder, but it could also be given as a liquid. This medicine in particular was used in all mental asylums around the 19th century as a way to calm down immediately people with mental health problems. It was supposed to be used to calm down crises. The problem is that the heroin mixed with the other drug, when given in such a high dosage, would create permanent mental damage to the patient, especially in their nervous system and the connections to the brain. Not to mention that it would also give the common heroin side effects. For example, this necessity of feeling a rush of something painful as an addiction, and having hyper moments. It's like a whole thing. I would recommend you looking into it because right now my mind is like in this entire story. If you want to read more about it, I would suggest to just look it up online. I did look it up online, and a lot of things started to make sense. My anxiety tics being related to stress affecting my nervous system started to make sense. It started to make sense why after that experience I started to suffer these anxiety tics. It was my brain giving nervous signals to my body when it felt in pain or threatened, and those signals would get mixed up, which would make movements be involuntary all around my body. This is not the only thing that started to happen after the events of the hospital. The hospital itself wasn't done with me. They jokingly said that I was a weakling because I only got 2 dosages. The other girl that screams so much, she gets 8 to 10 dosages every time she has a crisis. You don't want to be a bad girl and get too many dosages, don't you? That's essentially a threat of torture, because that's what it was. It was torture. On top of already getting screamed at by the other girl who was being sexually abused, I was getting screamed at, I was getting hit at, and none of the nurses did anything for me. Essentially, the only way I managed to get out of that hellhole was me pretending that I was okay. The nurses cared so little about their job at a mental hospital that me just faking being alright was enough to let me go. They believed that I was okay, so they just let me go. as soon as they could. They just let go whoever seems almost okay to go, so it looks like they did their job, but in reality they didn't. They didn't want to do their job. And one kid less was less job, so they just took an excuse to get me out of there. Of course, they then claimed that I was a liar, that I never suffered anything in my life and I was just seeking for attention. You know, as I guess mental hospitals do. Such a mental health professional that even me lying saying I was okay was enough to let me go. I did ask to be let go many times before that. They told me that they couldn't, even if it's illegal for them to keep me there against my will. They also manipulated my family members into letting me stay there. Legally speaking, they would get into trouble if I was not stable after I went there. As such, every time a person got out of there, it was always like, oh, but they were also faking and they were like liars. They would say that about every patient who got out. I was one of them, and it was just to get this like idea of that if the children still showed any symptoms of mental illness, it was their own fault because they were evil and it wasn't the hospital's fault for doing a terrible job. Essentially, I was kidnapped and tortured just because I dared to be mentally unstable after, being all the other stuff that I mentioned that was happening before I got to the hospital. After this, several years happened and I started to notice that a lot of things started happening to my body that were not happening before. The anxiety tics was just the start. Often the trigger for that was some type of physical stuff. For example, extreme heat waves. These heat waves are a trigger for a crisis to occur, and it starts as anxiety tics. Essentially, stress is like the thing that can get me to have anxiety tics. It can be emotional stress or physical stress. The brain perceives stress as danger. As such, I could get anxiety tics just for moving something very heavy, like physical stress, pushing my body to do work, and I could get it from mental stress, feeling depressed, either of those things could lead to an anxiety tic crisis. And the crisis is just the beginning. After that, my mouth stops working and I am unable to speak. I just associate this with going nonverbal for autistic people. However, in my case, it's more like I physically am unable to make words. My mouth stops responding to the commands of my brain. I am unable to do anything. After that, if the crisis is not taken care of, I will lose the ability to walk. I will fall to the floor and my legs will no longer respond to me. And if that gets any worse, I will have a full body paralysis. In the case of my legs no longer working, I do have control of my upper body, and by that point I would need a wheelchair to move around. Sadly, despite suffering from this, most adults in my life, they told me that I was faking it, that it was not real, just because I didn't have a piece of paper that said I was disabled. They just thought that I was someone who had tantrums like a child, and that's why I was creating a scenario, because I wanted attention. It's not that. I literally dropped to the floor and I'm unable to move. This makes sense with the whole theory that the drug that they gave me was blue heroin, because it seems that any kind of severe threat my brain perceives and they try to act according to it gets almost cut off by my nervous system. It no longer works. On top of that, I did started to have a necessity to feel a sudden pain. This did lead to me self-harming, mostly because it was like a replacement of needing the heroin drug. Of course, this is something that I'm still fighting against. I do not self-harm, and I've been trying to find different ways to get this like part of me that needs that like rush of adrenaline. I'm trying to get it in different ways. For example, whenever I cook for lunch, I sometimes stab the meat or just punch the meat to just make it more tender, and that is one of the ways that I can deal with it. It is not ideal always, but it is what I have right now and what works for me. So yeah. Now that you understand what is my disability, where it comes from, and what triggers it, you can understand why this hospital visit felt so horrible. I was waiting for an hour at first, and a person came and told me that they were going to attend me in 10 minutes. I had to wait another half an hour and a half under 100-degree Fahrenheit weather, knowing full well that weather is a trigger for this crisis. Not to mention there was constant chattering from the other patients. The place was filled with people. The smell was horrible. I just couldn't take it anymore. I was at the edge of having a crisis, and I knew I was at the edge of having a crisis. I was starting to get angry and desperate because I just didn't want to get a crisis. I didn't want to drop to the floor. I didn't want to have my mouth stop working for me. I didn't want to have body paralysis. So I just had to complain. I had to tell them, attend me. I am at the edge of having a crisis. Of course, I didn't say it so nicely as I'm saying it now, but I was desperate. I knew that if I didn't get any attention soon, I would even pass out, which it is a thing that tends to happen every now and then. I pass out for a couple of seconds. Very shortly afterwards, I started to show the symptoms of the crisis, the tics, and my body starting to shake. And very shortly, a nurse came in and actually attended me, meaning that they could have always attended me, they just didn't want to fucking work. We went to a room, it was quiet, it had an air conditioner and it was cleaner. The moment that I reached a room where I felt safe and the stress factors were lowering down is the moment that the crisis started to calm down. While I am disabled and this does limit, for example, where I can work and stuff like that, the truth is that these crises are completely avoidable if in the right circumstances. A single room, slightly colder, quieter, is enough to calm down the crisis, especially if it's at the early stages. It took me a couple of minutes, but I regained my composure. As usual, after I have a crisis, I feel extremely dizzy and extremely tired, but we were able to do the baby checkup. Everything was fine. I could hear their heartbeat. It was so sweet. Then we got out of there very fast. Faster than the other times I've had a checkup, and we tried to take the next appointment. Because I am pregnant, it is important to take an appointment exactly 1 month later or near a month later. This is where they refused to attend me. The nurses that had seen me have a crisis, they thought that I was just acting out and making a scene. Nurses, again, people who are supposed to take care of the health of a person, they thought I was just having a tantrum. Me and my husband went to take the next hour appointment, and the girl just kept making excuses. They said, oh no, but you should go somewhere else, we told them, I just want to get an appointment. At that point, I was already calmed down. I was talking similarly to how I'm talking now, even a little bit more tired, kind of sounded like this, because I was very tired, and I just told her, I just want an appointment for next month, and she just didn't want to give me an appointment. Before she even got to make me an appointment, we waited standing up in front of the place that was almost completely empty by that point. We waited standing up for 10 minutes. A pregnant woman standing up. I'm 5 months entering into 6 months of pregnancy. I shouldn't be standing up for that long. And on top of that, they didn't want to take my time. It's just something so small. They just refused to. They didn't have a reason. They just didn't want to see me there. Not only that, but they were constantly chattering in the background. Like, I could see the nurses behind the door not wanting to attend me. And they were talking about me, and they were making fun of me because I saw them smiling and laughing and pointing at me. It was very short, but yeah, I did get to see them. At some point, my husband, he was trying his best to remain calm despite how unfair the situation was. He tried to keep calm because he knew that if he wasn't calm, then I would probably panic even more. He's an amazing husband. He's always been there for me in this situation. He knows how to act and what I need. At some point, even he was fed up and he was like, you know what? You don't want to attend me. Fuck you. We're going to go somewhere else. And of course, the girls started to make fun of him. They did add a couple of racist comments because my husband is an immigrant. And on top of that, they just kept saying that, oh, it's not my fault that she's crazy. And they just started to talk about me like if I wasn't there. We went away. We did get the papers that we needed, but we don't have an appointment for the next time we go to the doctor. We were going to get some medicine that I need for pregnancy. It's not medicine, it's more like vitamins and stuff like that. It's something, more chill. But at some point, I just couldn't take it anymore and I broke down crying. It was awful. Feeling so vulnerable and having the same people who are supposed to help me but just be making fun of me for something that I can't control. Looking at me as if I was nothing but a bothersome, strange thing. I did get to explain to the nurse that attended me inside of this small room. I don't know the English name for it. However, once I was getting the appointment, the checkup, I did try to explain what was happening. My husband also tried to explain what was happening. It was a physical disability that affected me. And I could just tell that she just didn't want to deal with me. She was just she was using this tone of I'm trying to be nice, but please shut the fuck up. It's that tone nurses have when they don't want to deal with you, but they also don't want to seem rude. It's extremely rude. But then again, most nurses either treat me as a child or they treat me as a threat. And if I had to choose, I would rather be treated normally, but apparently that's too much to ask for health professionals, I guess. So they either treat me as a child or they treat me as a menace, and I guess I would rather be treated as a child by that point. We tried to get the vitamins, but the system was too slow, so we just left. And now I'm here. I don't have an appointment. However, because this is the public system, it's very likely that those women are probably going to get replaced or changed to another place next week. So we're going to try to get an appointment next week. Maybe we'll get lucky and those awful people are going to be gone by that point. Hopefully. I genuinely hope so. I just can't help but wonder, how awful do they treat people like me? People even in worse situations like me. Imagine all the poor women that are forced to go through pregnancy. Because probably Americans don't know this, but in the country I live in, things like abortions are illegal. And they often, if you go through an illegal abortion, not only are you doing something illegal, but also it puts the woman's health at risk. There is a risk of murdering the woman during the abortion. It is a real thing, so it's often advised to not go through with that. Sadly, many women are forced to go through with pregnancies. In my case, in Chile in particular, you can get an abortion if you either have the baby is either too deformed or too much of a danger for the mother to be born, or if the mother was sexually assaulted. In the case of sexual assault, a lot of the time the woman has to show that she's going through with a legal lawsuit against the man who sexually assaulted her, or that at the very least there's some kind of police report about it. It has happened that some women decide to report their love partners as their sexual abusers just so they can get the abortion. So it is a thing that affects both men and women. Not equally, but it is a thing that affects both of them. And if you don't like it, then too bad. You should have closed your legs before you opened them. That's often the response that you get from people who are supposed to take care of you. In my case, I'm lucky that I have a husband that adores me. I'm lucky that I have a child that I want to have. It came as a surprise. We didn't really plan any of this. But, we still love this kid. I still want to be a mom, even if it came as a surprise. And besides, it's not like I had any other option. But just imagine girls who didn't want to go through with this, or girls who were abandoned by the father once the father knew that they were pregnant. Imagine how they get treated at places like that. Girls who go there because they have no other choice but to go there because they're poor. It sucks. It genuinely sucks. It makes me feel sick. And I can't help but wonder what would happen if any disability that I have, like for example autism, what would happen if my child has that? How would they be treated? It's something that genuinely makes me feel afraid. The only thing that I can offer to this child, that they're going to have a loving mother, father, a loving household that is not going to pressure them into being anything except being happy. And even if they're not happy, it's going to be okay too. Because having a happy life doesn't mean that you're happy forever. It just means that sometimes you get sad and sometimes you get happy, but hopefully you are more happy than sad. I just want to give this child the opportunity to have a life where they know they're loved, they know they can make mistakes, they know that even if they're a little different, maybe if they are disabled, either physically or mentally, they know that there will be someone who will always love them, even if the rest of the world seems to treat them as animals, just like they've done with me. And I guess I just wanted to vent a little bit about it. This is a very sour video, but I think I needed to get it out of my chest. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.